The signal came from a planet that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Kurasal stood on the observation deck of the Vrethkai flagship Eternal Flame, his scanner dead in his hand, and watched the mountain range below register as empty space. Not shielded, not masked, empty. The white stone corridors of the quiet forge absorbed light the way a throat absorbs sound completely, without echo. He had survived 14 campaigns. He had recorded history for the Kavani for 847 years. His hands did not shake, not usually. They shook now. The ceramic cup in Ambassador Wei's scarred left palm caught the mountain light. It was 400 years old, fired in a kiln that no longer stood, and Wei had not offered it yet. He was waiting. They were all waiting, 12 species observers, the Vali elder silent in the corner, and Admiral Vexarin at the center of the bridge court, with his bronze armor clicking like a clock that had never been wrong. The inspection, Vexarin said, is a formality. Category 7 Death World, chemical rockets, low priority for 287 years. His obsidian eyes found Kurasal. You requested this, Lieutenant. You will explain what you found. Kurasal's throat closed. He thought of the corridor. 400 meters of polished stone that his scanner could not see. The door that opened like a flower. The sphere inside that pulsed at a frequency his heart had learned to match without permission. I wish I could tell you it ended there. It didn't. Stay close. 3 weeks earlier, the Eternal Flame had hung above a red nebula, its bridgecourt smelling of ozone and cold metal. Kurasal had stood at attention, his ceremonial sash tight across shoulders that had carried the weight of 14 wars, and listened to Vexarin laugh. The laugh was not cruel. That was the wrong detail. It was the laugh of a man who had never been wrong, a soft, almost tired sound, like wind through a sealed hull. Humans, Vexarin said, want an inspection of their own facility. They have invited us to measure what they have built. He spread his broad, scaled hands. Measure a cave in a mountain. My species was building such places when theirs was still learning agriculture. Kurasal had not spoken. In 3,000 years of Kavani recorded history, no lieutenant had contradicted an admiral in open court. But his hands had found the edge of the console, and his fingers had pressed until the metal groaned. Vexarin heard it, the clicking stopped, the obsidian eyes turned. You have something to say, Lieutenant. No, Admiral. Kurasal's voice was steady. It had been steady for 8 centuries. Only that I will accompany the inspection team. You will lead it, Vexarin said. 12 species send observers. The Vali send Elder Velsharath. A pause. If this is a joke, Lieutenant, it will be yours to explain. The landing platform jutted from the mountain like a tongue. The air tasted of pine and something else, a mineral bite that Kurasal's lungs could not identify. The quiet forge had been built into a range that had been silent for 2 million years. The white stone drank the afternoon light. Dr. Yuki Tanaka waited at the platform's edge. She was 41 years old. Her white coat was gray at the cuffs from washing. Her fingers were stained with ink, and she carried a leather satchel that had been worn soft at the corners. Lieutenant Kurasal, she said, her voice was quiet. Not small quiet the way a held breath is quiet. The corridor is this way. She did not offer her hand. She did not offer explanations. She turned and walked, and the satchel swung against her hip with a weight that suggested it was not empty. Sergeant Pete Ackefer fell in beside him, 29 years old, dog tags that caught the light. The maintenance corridor is this way, he said, and grinned. Doc Tanaka likes to skip the small talk. Kurasal's scanner was already active. 14 spectra, calibrated to detect energy signatures across every known range. He had used it on 1,000 worlds. It had never failed him. It failed now. The corridor stretched before them, 400 meters of white stone, polished to a finish that seemed to pull light into itself. Kurasal raised his scanner. The screen flickered. The readout flatlined. Empty space. Not low readings, not interference, empty, as if the corridor did not exist in any measurable way. Your equipment, Tanaka said, without turning, may not register what we have built. We stopped trying to match your models 90 years ago. Kurosawa's breath caught. The number 90 landed like a stone in still water. He had been alive for 847 years. 90 years was a blink, a nothing, a single campaign. But Tanaka had said it the way someone said a date they remembered exactly. The weather, the light, the weight of the decision. They walked. The corridor hummed. Not a sound Kurosawa's ears could hear, a pressure in his teeth, a vibration in the bone behind his eyes. He had felt something like it once, on a world where the gravity was wrong. But this was not gravity. This was something his body recognized before his mind could name it. At the corridor's end, a door waited. No handle, no panel, no interface. Just a seam in the white stone, so fine it might have been a crack in the rock. Akefer stepped forward. He pressed his palm to the seam. The stone split. Not slid, split like petals, like something growing. The door opened like a flower, and beyond it the sphere waited. 12 meters across. Not metal, not crystal, not any state of matter the Kavani Science Council had a category for. It hung in the center of the chamber without support, without sound, and it pulsed. Kurosawa's heart, without his permission, began to beat in time with it. He staggered. Akefer caught his elbow, a human hand, warm, calloused, steady. First time's rough, Akefer said. The frequency's 4.7 hertz. Your body'll learn to ignore it, or not. 4.7 hertz. Kurosawa's chest tightened. His scanner showed nothing. His heart showed everything. Tanaka had not moved. She stood at the sphere's edge, her ink-stained fingers resting on the leather satchel, and she watched him with an expression he could not read. It was not triumph. It was not pity. It was the look of someone who had waited a very long time for a question to be asked. You have built, Kurosawa said, and his voice cracked, something that cannot be measured. We have built, Tanaka said, a question. She opened the satchel, the leather side. Inside, a notebook handwritten, page 1847 of 2100, ink on paper, the most advanced technology in the galaxy, recorded by hand. She read aloud. 14 years, 3 months, and 7 days ago, we stopped asking what you could measure. We started asking what your instruments could not see. Kurosawa's knees gave out. He did not fall, Akefer held him, but the bridge of his legs trembled. 847 years, 14 campaigns, 3,000 years of recorded history, and he had never, not once, seen a civilization build what it could not prove. Vexarin's voice echoed from the landing platform, transmitted through the comm link Kurosawa had forgotten he wore. Lieutenant, report. What have they built? Kurosawa looked at the sphere. He looked at the notebook. He looked at Tanaka's ink-stained fingers, steady on page 1847, and he understood that the Vrethkai Dominion had been measuring the wrong things for 11,000 years. But he did not say that, not yet. He could not make his mouth form the words. Lieutenant, Vexarin said again, and the bronze armor clicked in the background, a clock that had never been wrong. I am waiting. Tanaka closed the satchel. The leather sighed again. She looked at Kurosawa with that same unreadable expression, patient, unflappable, intellectually fierce beneath the stillness, and she waited too. The corridor hummed. The sphere pulsed. Kurosawa's heart beat at 4.7 hertz, and for the first time in 847 years, he did not know what to say. The return to the eternal flame took 6 hours. Kurosawa sat in the shuttle's observation bay, the notebook page folded in his pocket. Tanaka had allowed him to keep it, a single sheet of paper with handwriting he could not read, and watched the mountain shrink below. The quiet forge became a white scar on the rock, then a speck, then nothing. His scanner sat dead on the seat beside him. He had not turned it off. It had simply stopped trying. Elder Velshareth sat across from him. The Vali was small, ancient beyond the measuring of years, her skin like folded parchment that had been written on and erased 1,000 times. She had not spoken during the inspection. She had not touched the tea Wei offered. She had watched and she had waited. Now she spoke. "Your hands," she said, "have stopped shaking." Curacao looked at them. They were steady. They had been steady for 8 centuries and they were steady now. But she was right, they had stopped shaking. The tremor that had begun on the observation deck, before the corridor, before the sphere, had settled into something else, something worse. "Elder," he said, "I do not know what I witnessed." "Yes," Velshareth said, "that is why I am here." She did not explain. The Vali never explained. They observed and they left, and species rose and fell across their 40,000 years of silence, and sometimes, rarely, they spoke a single sentence that changed everything. The shuttle docked. The eternal flame swallowed them in its bronze and ozone scent. Curacao walked to his quarters without speaking to the other observers, without filing his preliminary report, without doing any of the things a Kavani lieutenant of 847 years was supposed to do. He sat on his bunk. He unfolded the page. The handwriting was small, precise, the letters connected in a way that suggested speed and care at once. Numbers, coordinates, a date he could not translate, and at the bottom, in larger script, a single line. "We do not build bigger than you. We do not build faster. We build differently." He read it 7 times. The words did not change. The meaning did. A chime at his door. He did not answer. The chime came again, then stopped. Footsteps retreated. Curacao lay back, the page on his chest, and listened to his heartbeat at 4.7 hertz in a ship that could not hear it. The Bridgecourt convened at dawn, ship's dawn, the artificial cycle of a vessel that had never retreated. Vexarin sat at the center, his bronze armor catching the red nebula light through the transparent hull. 12 species observers stood in the tiered galleries. The Vali elder sat in the lowest tier, her eyes closed, her hands folded like paper origami. Curacao stood at the witness podium. His ceremonial sash was straight. His hands were steady. But his voice, when he began to speak, was not the voice of a man who had survived 14 campaigns. It was the voice of a man who had seen something his instruments could not explain, and who understood, finally, terribly, that the universe was larger than the categories he had used to measure it. "Admiral," he said, "the facility designated Quiet Forge is not a weapon. It is not a shield. It is not any technology the Kavani Science Council has a category for." Vexarin's upper lip curled. Not anger, something older, the reflex of a man who had conquered 6 worlds and had never been contradicted. "Then what is it, Lieutenant?" Curacao thought of the corridor, the door like a flower, the sphere that his heart had learned to beat with, the notebook with its 2,100 pages of handwritten answers to a question the galaxy had forgotten was important. He thought of Tanaka's ink-stained fingers, Wei's scarred palm steady on a 400-year-old cup, Akafer's grin, and the way he had caught Curacao's elbow without being asked. He thought of the number 90 years and how small it was, and how large. "I do not know," he said, and the Bridgecourt went silent. "But I know this. We have been measuring the wrong things for 11,000 years." Vexarin's hand moved. Slowly, as if through thick water, it went to his sidearm. A ceremonial weapon, never drawn in the Bridgecourt. A reflex 2,200 years old. For the first time in all those years, the Admiral was afraid. Not of the sphere, not of the humans. Of what it meant that he could not see it. Elder Velshareth opened her eyes. She looked at Curacao. She looked at Vexarin. She looked at the red nebula beyond the transparent hull, where stars were born and died across spans of time that made 11,000 years seem like a single breath. "What if," she said, and her voice was dry as dust and older than the Vrethkai Dominion, "we have been measuring the wrong things for 11,000 years?" No one answered. The Bridgecourt held its breath. The bronze armor did not click. The scanners did not hum. The only sound was Kurasal's heart, beating at 4.7 hertz in a chest that had survived 14 campaigns and now understood that survival was not the same as seeing. And somewhere below, in the mountain that registered as empty space, the sphere pulsed on, a question without an answer. A technology that could not be measured, a heartbeat that the galaxy had not learned to hear. Vexarin did not draw the weapon. His hand stayed on the grip, the bronze scales of his arm catching the red light, and the Bridgecourt held its breath for a span that Kurasal could not measure. No scanner could time this. No instrument could record what happened in the silence between a question and the refusal to answer it. The Admiral's obsidian eyes found Kurasal. They did not blink. 2,200 years of certainty looked out from them, and for a moment, a flicker, a pulse, Kurasal saw something he had never seen before. "Doubt." "Dismissed," Vexarin said. His voice was flat. "All observers dismissed. The lieutenant will remain." The galleries emptied. 12 species filed out, their footsteps soft on the tiered decking. The Vali elder paused at the threshold. She did not look back. She did not need to. Her single sentence hung in the ozone-thick air like smoke. Then they were alone. Kurasal and the Admiral, the transparent hull and the red nebula beyond, the bronze armor that clicked when Vexarin moved, and the sidearm that had never been drawn in the Bridgecourt. "You have served the Dominion," Vexarin said, "for 847 years. "Yes, Admiral." "You have recorded 14 campaigns without error." "Yes, Admiral." "And now you stand before me and say you do not know what you saw." Kurasal's hand found the folded page in his pocket. The paper was soft. The ink had bled slightly at one corner, a smear that might have been water or might have been something else. "I know what I felt," Kurasal said. "I know what my heart did. I know that my scanner calibrated to 14 spectra tested on 1,000 worlds showed nothing. Empty space, not shielded, not masked, empty." Vexarin's upper lip curled again, the same reflex, but slower now. The clock that had never been wrong was missing a beat. "And this?" The Admiral touched his own chest, where a heart beat at its own frequency, untouched by spheres or questions. "Your heart. A biological reaction, fear, disorientation. You are 847 years old, Lieutenant. You have felt fear before." "Not like this." The words came out before Kurasal could stop them. Not like this. He had felt fear in combat, the cold wash of it, the calculation of survival, the body doing what bodies do when death is near. This was different. This was the fear of a man who had spent his life reading a map and suddenly discovered the map was not the territory. Vexarin turned to the transparent hull. The red nebula swirled beyond it, clouds of gas where stars were being born in violence and light. He had conquered 6 worlds. He had never retreated. The eternal flame had carried him across spans of time that made Kurasal's 8 centuries seem like a child's summer. 287 years, Vexarin said. "We have catalogued humans as low priority for 287 years. Chemical rockets, Category 7. Death world, yes, but death worlds are common. The galaxy is full of things that kill their own." He turned back. The obsidian eyes held something new, not doubt exactly, something harder, the look of a man who had built a fortress and was now inspecting its foundations. "Send me the full report," Vexarin said. "Every detail, the corridor, the door, the sphere, the notebook, the woman with the ink on her fingers," a pause, "and the tea, do not forget the tea." Kurasal wrote the report in his quarters, the page from Tanaka's notebook spread beside his console. He wrote for 6 hours without stopping. He described the corridor's hum, not a sound, a pressure. He described the door opening like a flower, the stone splitting along seams that had not existed until Akafar's palm touched them. He described the sphere, the pulse, the synchronization of his heart. He did not describe the look on Tanaka's face. He did not have words for it. Patient, yes. Unflappable, yes. But beneath the stillness, something fierce. Something that had waited 90 years for someone to finally ask the right question. He sent the report. He waited. The eternal flame drifted above the red nebula, and Kurasal listened to his heartbeat at its own frequency now, free of the sphere's pull, and wondered if that was freedom or loss. The reply came at ship's midnight, not from Vexarin, from the Dominion Council itself. A formal summons. Kurasal was to testify before the full assembly, not as a lieutenant reporting findings but as a witness. A Kavani witness, bound by 3,000 years of honor protocol to speak only what he had seen, not what he believed. He dressed in his formal sash. He folded the page and placed it in his ceremonial pocket. He walked to the assembly chamber through corridors that smelled of ozone and old metal, and he thought of white stone that drank light and a corridor that registered as empty space. The chamber was larger than the bridge court. Tiered galleries rose in a spiral, each level filled with representatives of species Kurasal had never met. The Vrethkai held the center, but the center was not what it had been. Something had shifted. He could feel it in the air, a pressure like the hum of the quiet forge, but political, social, the vibration of an empire adjusting to a new frequency. Vexarin sat at the highest tier, his bronze armor dulled by the chamber's blue light. He did not speak. He watched. Kurasal stood at the witness podium. The sash was tight across his shoulders. His hands were steady. He had told this story once to Vexarin in the bridge court. He would tell it again to the galaxy, and he would tell it exactly the same way. That was the Kavani way. A witness did not embellish. A witness did not interpret. A witness spoke what he had seen and let the listeners draw their own conclusions. But as he opened his mouth, he saw Tanaka's face again. The ink on her fingers, the gray cuffs of her coat, the way she had carried the satchel, not like a burden but like a promise. And he understood that the story he was about to tell was not his. It was hers. It was humanity's. He was only the mouth that spoke it, the heart that had beaten in time with their sphere, the instrument that had finally measured something by failing to measure it at all. The facility, he began, is built into a mountain range that has been silent for 2 million years. His voice carried. The spiral galleries fell still. Somewhere in the upper tiers, a translator clicked, converting his words into languages that spanned the breadth of the Dominion. The corridor is 400 meters of white stone, polished to a finish that absorbs light. My scanner, calibrated to 14 spectra, registered it as empty space. Not shielded, not masked, empty. A murmur in the galleries, not loud, the sound of certainty cracking. At the corridor's end, a door, no handle. No panel, no interface. A human soldier, Sergeant Pete Akaffer, 29 years old, dog tags that caught the light, pressed his palm to the stone. The door opened like a flower. Beyond it, a sphere, 12 meters across, not metal, not crystal, not any state of matter my science council has a category for. He paused. The chamber breathed. He could feel Vexarin's eyes on him, the weight of 2,200 years of never being wrong. It pulsed, Kurasal said, at a frequency my body recognized before my mind could name it. My heart, without my permission, without my understanding, began to beat in time with it. The murmur grew, not a sound of disbelief, a sound of recognition. In the lower tiers, Kurasal saw hands move to chests, heard breath catch. The galaxy was full of species, and some of them had hearts, and some of them had something else, but all of them knew what it meant when a body betrayed its own rhythm. A woman waited at the sphere's edge. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, 41 years old, ink-stained fingers, a white coat gray at the cuffs from washing. She carried a leather satchel containing a notebook, handwritten, 2,100 pages, ink on paper. She read from page 1847. Kurasal reached into his pocket. He unfolded the page. The ink had bled at the corner. The handwriting was small, precise, connected in a way that suggested speed and care. "We stopped trying to match your models 90 years ago," he read. "We started asking what your models could not measure. We do not build bigger than you. We do not build faster. We build differently." The chamber was silent. The translators had stopped clicking. In the highest tier, Vexarin sat motionless, his bronze armor dull, his obsidian eyes fixed on something that was not in the room. Then a voice, not Vexarin's, not Kurasal's, a voice from the mid-tier, scaled and sharp, a Vrethkai commander, young, his armor new, his certainty unearned. "And this is proof," the commander said, "a biological reaction, a notebook, a sphere that does not register. This is what breaks 11,000 years." Kurasal looked at the page in his hand. He thought of Tanaka's expression, the fierce patience beneath the stillness. He thought of Wei's scarred palm on a 400-year-old cup. He thought of Akafar's grin, and the way he had caught Kurasal's elbow without being asked, the way you catch someone who is about to fall. "No," Kurasal said, "it is not proof, it is a question." He folded the page, the paper sighed. "The question is this: what else have we measured and found empty, that was not empty at all? What else have we called low priority because our instruments could not see it? What else have we conquered, not knowing that the conquest was an illusion built from the wrong kind of sight?" The commander did not answer. No one answered. The spiral galleries held their breath, and Kurasal stood at the center of the silence, his heart beating at its own frequency. And he knew, with a certainty that had nothing to do with scanners or spectra or 11,000 years of Dominion history, that the question was larger than any answer he could give. In the highest tier, Vexarin stood. Slowly. The bronze armor clicked once, a single sound in the silence, and the Admiral's voice was not the voice of a man who had conquered 6 worlds. It was the voice of a man who had heard something in the dark and was not yet sure if it was a threat or a truth. "Recall the inspection team," Vexarin said. "All 12 species, we returned to Earth, not as inspectors, as students." The chamber erupted, not in protest, in something else. The sound of an empire turning. Kurasal felt it in his chest, a vibration deeper than the sphere's pulse, deeper than his own heart. The Dominion had never retreated, but this was not retreat. This was the first step toward a door that opened like a flower, toward a question that had no answer in any language the Vrethkai had learned to speak. And in the lowest tier, where the light was thickest and the air was oldest, Elder Velshareth opened her eyes. She looked at Kurasal. She looked at Vexarin. She looked at the page in Kurasal's hand, and she smiled, a small, folded thing, like paper origami unfolding in slow motion. 847 years, she said, not loud, but the translators picked it up and the chamber fell still again. "You have lived 847 years, Lieutenant, and in all that time, you have never once been the first to see something new." Kurasal's hands began to shake again, not from fear, from something else. The weight of a measurement taken with the wrong instrument for 11,000 years, and the sudden, terrible freedom of understanding that the instrument could be changed. The eternal flame turned toward Earth. The red nebula fell behind, and somewhere in the dark between stars, Kurasal sat in the observation deck and watched the mountain range grow from a speck to a scar to a white promise on the rock, and he wondered what Tanaka would say when she saw them return. Not as inspectors, as students. The question terrified him, the question thrilled him. The question was the only thing that had ever mattered, and he had spent 847 years not knowing to ask it. The mountain did not look the same from above. Kurasal stood on the observation deck as the eternal flame descended, and the white scar on the rock had changed. Not in shape, the mountain was the mountain, silent for 2 million years, but in meaning. 2 weeks ago, it had been a curiosity, a Category 7 anomaly, a low-priority footnote in 11,000 years of Dominion history. Now it was a question that had made an admiral reach for a sidearm he had never drawn. The landing platform jutted from the slope like a tongue. The pine air waited. The ceramic cups, 400 years old, sat on the table where Ambassador Wei had left them, and Kurasal could see from the deck that the cups were still warm. Someone had been here. Someone had known they were coming back. Not as inspectors, Vexarin said behind him. The admiral had not slept. The bronze armor was dull, unpolished, and the clicking had stopped entirely. As students, I have never been a student, Lieutenant. I do not know the posture. Kurasal turned. The obsidian eyes held something he had not seen before. Not doubt, not fear, a hunger maybe. The look of a man who had eaten the same food for 2,200 years and had just discovered there was another menu. Then we learned together, Admiral. Vexarin's lip curled, the old reflex. But it did not complete itself. The curl started and died, and the Admiral's hand went to his chest, where a heart beat at its own frequency, untouched by spheres. Together, Vexarin said, the word sounded foreign in his mouth. A strange word. I have conquered 6 worlds alone. The landing platform was not empty. Ambassador Wei stood at the edge, his scarred left palm steady at his side. Sergeant Akafer leaned against the railing, dog tags catching the light, his posture loose in a way that suggested he had not expected them to return. Behind him, a woman in a white coat with gray cuffs waited with her hands in her pockets, and the leather satchel was not with her. Tanaka was not there. Kurasal's heart missed a beat, not the sphere's frequency, his own. The panic was sudden and sharp, a soldier's reflex, and he hated it. He hated that he had learned to need her presence, her quiet, her ink-stained fingers on 2,100 pages of answers. Dr. Tanaka, Wei said, and his voice was the same, patient, measured, the voice of a man who had offered tea in 400-year-old cups and would offer it again, is inside. She said the sphere has been pulsing differently since you left. She said it is waiting. Waiting for what? Vexarin asked. Wei smiled. It was a small thing, scarred and steady. For you to ask the right question, Admiral. She said you have not asked it yet. The bronze armor clicked once. Vexarin's hand moved to his sidearm, the reflex, the 2,000-year habit, and stopped. He looked at the mountain. He looked at the cups. He looked at Akafer's loose posture and Wei's scarred palm and the absence of the woman with the satchel, and something in his shoulders settled. Then we will ask, he said. The corridor was different this time. Kurasal felt it before his feet touched the white stone. The hum was deeper, not in his teeth but in his chest, a resonance that seemed to come from inside rather than out. His scanner stayed dead in his pocket. He did not need it to tell him what he already knew. The stone drank the light. The 400 meters passed in silence, broken only by the click of Vexarin's armor and the soft tread of the Vali elder, who had come without being summoned. Vel Shareth moved like folded paper in a breeze, ancient and deliberate, and her eyes were open. At the corridor's end, the door waited. No handle, no panel, no interface. The seam in the stone was wider than Kurasal remembered, not cracked, open, waiting. Akafer stepped forward. He pressed his palm to the seam. The stone split like petals, like something growing, and the light from within was not the light of the sphere. It was the light of the notebook. Tanaka sat on the floor of the chamber, her white coat spread beneath her like a blanket, the leather satchel open, and the pages spread in a fan that covered the polished stone. 2,100 pages, ink on paper, the most advanced technology in the galaxy, scattered like leaves, and Tanaka's fingers were stained darker than Kurasal remembered. You came back, she said, not to Akafer, not to Wei, to Kurasal. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either, Kurasal said. Vexarin pushed past him. The Admiral's armor clicked against the doorframe, and he stopped at the edge of the pages, his boots hovering over ink that had dried years ago, decades ago, centuries of human handwriting in a language he could not read. "What is this?" Vexarin asked. His voice was not the voice of an admiral. It was the voice of a man who had found a door in a wall he had thought was solid. "This," Tanaka said, "is the question." She lifted a page. The handwriting was small, precise, connected in a way that suggested speed and care. Every page is a failed measurement. Every page is a wrong answer we tried to give you. Every page is proof that your instruments, your 14 spectra, your 11,000 years of certainty, could not see what we were building. She stood. The white coat fell away, and she was small, fierce, 41 years old with ink on her fingers and gray at her cuffs, and she walked to the sphere. It pulsed. The frequency was not 4.7 hertz anymore. It was something else. Something that made Kurasal's chest tighten and his breath catch, and his hands reach for the page in his pocket without thinking. 90 years ago, Tanaka said, we stopped trying to impress you. We stopped trying to build bigger, faster, stronger. We started asking what you could not measure, and we built the answer. She touched the sphere, not with her hand, with the page. She pressed the handwritten paper to the surface that was not metal, not crystal, not any state of matter the Kavani Science Council had a category for, and the sphere responded. It sang. Not a sound, a vibration in the bones, in the blood, in the spaces between atoms. The chamber filled with light that had no color, and Kurasal's heart began to beat in time with it again, but this time it was not fear. This time it was recognition, the body learning a language it had not known it could speak. Vexarin staggered. The Admiral's hand went to his sidearm, the reflex, the 2,000-year habit, and this time he drew it. The weapon was ceremonial, bronze and obsidian, never fired in the bridge court, never fired in 11,000 years of Dominion history. He pointed it at the sphere. "Stop," he said. "I do not understand. I do not understand, and I demand that you stop." Tanaka did not stop. She pressed the page harder, and the ink began to glow. The handwriting, small, precise, connected in a way that suggested speed and care, lifted from the paper like smoke, like breath, like words becoming something else. "You have measured everything," Tanaka said. "Energy, mass velocity, frequency. You have built an empire on what your instruments can see, but you have never measured patience. You have never measured the weight of a question asked for 90 years. You have never measured what a species can build when it stops trying to compete and starts trying to understand." The glowing words hung in the air. They formed shapes, not letters, shapes. The shape of a corridor that registered as empty space. The shape of a door that opened like a flower. The shape of a heart beating at 4.7 hertz, learning a new rhythm. Vexarin's arm trembled. The weapon shook. The bronze and obsidian caught the lightless light, and the Admiral's face, scaled, ancient, never contradicted, crumpled. "I do not understand," he said again, but this time it was not a demand. It was a confession. "I know," Tanaka said. She removed the page, the glow faded. The sphere returned to its pulse, its question, its patient waiting. "That is why we are here, not to conquer, not to impress, to teach you how to ask." She turned to Kurasal. Her expression was the same, patient, unflappable, intellectually fierce beneath the stillness, but something had shifted. The fierceness was not hidden anymore. It was present, like the hum in the corridor, like the pulse in the sphere. "You," she said, "have been our best student. Your heart learned before your mind did. Your scanner failed before your courage did. You have carried the question back to them, and now they must choose whether to answer." Kurasal's hand found the page in his pocket. The paper was soft. The ink had bled at the corner. He thought of the report he had written, the testimony he had given, the silence in the spiral galleries when he had asked what else they had measured and found empty. I am not a student, he said. I am a witness. Yes, Tanaka said. That is the lesson. The best students are witnesses. The best witnesses are students. The difference is only in whether you are willing to be changed. Vexarin lowered the weapon. The ceremonial bronze touched the stone floor with a sound that was not a click. It was softer, like a sigh, like the leather of a satchel closing. The admiral's shoulders bent. Not much. A fraction of a degree. But for a man who had never retreated, never been contradicted, never admitted to not understanding, it was the bend of a tree in a wind that had been blowing for 90 years and had finally reached him. What do I do? Vexarin asked. Tanaka looked at the sphere. She looked at the pages scattered on the floor. She looked at the admiral with his weapon lowered, and his armor dull, and his obsidian eyes reflecting light that seemed to absorb meaning rather than give it. You ask, she said, and you listen, and you do not measure the answer with instruments that were built to see something else. She walked to the corridor. The white stone drank her footsteps. At the door she paused. The sphere will pulse for 2 million more years, she said. The mountain will be silent. The question will wait. It does not need you, but you need it. That is the only measurement that matters. She left. The door closed behind her, not like a flower this time, but like a decision, a finality, the end of a lesson and the beginning of something that would take longer than 11,000 years to learn. Vexarin stood alone among the pages. Kurasal stood beside him. The Vali elder sat in the corner, her eyes closed, her hands folded, and she was smiling, that small, unfolding thing, like paper origami in slow motion. The sphere pulsed. The lightless light filled the chamber, and Kurasal understood, with a clarity that made his eyes burn and his throat close, that the quiet forge was not a weapon and not a shield and not a technology that could be measured. It was a mirror. It showed you what you could not see. It asked you what you were not willing to ask. It measured you with an instrument you did not know you possessed, the part of yourself that could be changed. And the Dominion, 11,000 years of certainty, 6 worlds of conquest, 2,200 years of never being wrong, looked into that mirror and saw a student where an admiral had stood. Vexarin did not speak. The ceremonial weapon lay on the stone, bronze and obsidian catching the lightless light, and the admiral's hands hung at his sides like things he had forgotten how to use. 11,000 years of Dominion history stood in that chamber, and for the first time, it did not know what to do next. Kurasal picked up the weapon, not to keep it, to move it. He set it against the wall, beside the door that had opened like a flower, and the metal made no sound against the stone. The quiet forge absorbed even that. We should go, Kurasal said. Vexarin did not move. His eyes were fixed on the sphere, on the pages scattered across the floor, on the ink that had glowed and lifted and become something else. I drew my weapon, he said. In 11,000 years I have never drawn it in fear, only in ceremony, only in victory. Yes, Admiral. I was afraid of a notebook. Yes, Admiral. Vexarin turned. The obsidian eyes held no reflection now. They were empty in a way that was not blindness. It was the emptiness of a map that had been erased, waiting for new lines. What happens to the Dominion now? Kurasal thought of the young commander in the spiral galleries, the scaled voice sharp with unearned certainty. He thought of 12 species filing out of the bridge court, hands moving to chests, breath catching in recognition. He thought of the eternal flame turning toward Earth, not as inspectors, as students, and the word that had sounded foreign in Vexarin's mouth. I do not know, Kurasal said, but I know that the question is larger than the answer, and I know that you are the first admiral in 11,000 years willing to ask it. The corridor was different on the way out. Not in shape, the white stone still drank the light, the 400 meters still stretched in silence, but in meaning. Kurasal's feet knew the path now. His body knew the hum. His heart knew the frequency it had learned, and it beat in its own rhythm, free but not unchanged. At the corridor's mouth, the mountain air waited, pine and mineral bite. The landing platform jutted from the slope, and Ambassador Wei stood at the edge with his scarred palm steady, and the ceramic cups were still warm. Tanaka was not there. Kurosawa's heart missed again. The panic was smaller this time, more familiar, a reflex he was learning to recognize rather than obey. "She is in the forge," Wei said, not a question, a statement. "She said you would come. She said the lesson was not for the admiral, it was for the witness." Kurosawa walked to the platform's edge. The mountain fell away below, white stone and green pine, and somewhere in the range that had been silent for 2 million years, a sphere pulsed on. A question without an answer. A heartbeat the galaxy had not learned to hear. "She also said," Wei continued, and his voice was softer now, "that the notebook has 2,100 pages and you have seen only one. She said the last page is not for students. It is for witnesses who have become something else." Kurosawa turned. "What else?" Wei smiled. The scarred palm lifted, gestured toward the mountain. "Go and see." The forge was empty when Kurosawa entered. The sphere pulsed. The pages still lay scattered, ink on paper, the most advanced technology in the galaxy spread like leaves on stone. But Tanaka was gone. The satchel was gone. Only the notebook remained, closed now, resting against the sphere's base like an offering. Kurosawa knelt, his knees ached. 847 years, 14 campaigns, and he had never knelt in a place that was not a battlefield. The stone was warm. The sphere's pulse was everywhere, in the stone, in the air, in the blood moving through his heart. He opened the notebook. Page 1, not page 1847, the first page, the beginning. The handwriting was different, not Tanaka's small, precise script, larger, older. The hand of someone who had started this before Kurosawa was born, before the Dominion was born, before the galaxy had learned to measure anything at all. "We asked," the page read, "what the universe would look like if we stopped trying to impress it. This is the answer." Kurosawa turned the page, and the next, and the next. Each page was a failed measurement, a wrong answer, a dead end that had led somewhere else. The handwriting changed as he turned, older to newer, larger to smaller, the script of generations of humans who had asked the same question and refused to accept the answers their instruments gave. On page 100, a note in the margin: "The Vrethkai measure energy, we measure patience, which lasts longer." On page 400, "They build warships, we build quiet, which travels farther." On page 900, 11,000 years of certainty. How many questions did they stop asking? Kurosawa's hands shook, not the tremor of fear, the tremor of recognition. He had lived 847 years in a civilization that measured everything and saw nothing. And now, he held 2,100 pages of humans who had measured nothing and seen everything. He turned to the last page, page 2100. The handwriting was Tanaka's, small, precise, connected in a way that suggested speed and care, and the ink was still wet. "To the witness who became a student," it read. "To the student who became a question, the sphere is not ours, the mountain is not ours, the quiet is not ours. We only learn to listen. Now it is your turn to teach. The notebook is yours, the satchel is yours, the question is yours. We do not build bigger, we do not build faster, we build differently. And differently is the only thing that lasts." Kurosawa closed the notebook. The leather sighed. He held it in his hands, ink-stained now, his own stains mixing with Tanaka's, with the stains of generations, and he understood the hidden layer. The way she had carried the satchel not like a burden but like a promise. The way she had waited. The way she had known from the first moment on the landing platform that he was not an inspector but a witness, not a conqueror but a student. She had seen him before he had seen himself. He stood, the sphere pulsed. The lightless light filled the chamber, and Kurasal walked to the door with the notebook in his hands, and the stone split like petals, like something growing, and he stepped into the corridor that registered as empty space and was full of everything. The bridge court convened one final time, not on the eternal flame, on Earth. The Vrethkai had never held court on a Category 7 world, never lowered their bronze armor to alien soil, never admitted that a species of chemical rocket users might have something to teach them. They held it now. Vexarin sat at the center, but the center was not what it had been. His armor was unpolished. His obsidian eyes were empty in the way of erased maps. And beside him, on a stool that had been carved from the white stone of the mountain, sat Kurasal with the notebook open on his lap. 12 species filled the galleries. The young commander was there, his new armor dulled, his scaled hands folded in a posture that was not quite submission but was no longer certainty. The Vali elder sat in the lowest tier, her eyes open, her paper face unfolded into something that might have been hope. Vexarin spoke, not as an admiral, as a student. "We have measured," he said, "for 11,000 years. We have built an empire on what our instruments could see, and we have been wrong, not in our measurements, in our questions. We asked what could be conquered. We did not ask what could be understood." He looked at Kurasal. The obsidian eyes held no reflection, but they held something else. The look of a man who had found a door in a wall he had thought was solid and had walked through it, and had discovered that the wall was not a wall at all. "The lieutenant," Vexarin said, "will speak. He is no longer a lieutenant, he is no longer Kavani, he is something we do not have a category for. That is the point, that is the lesson, that is the measurement that broke an empire." Kurasal stood. The notebook was heavy in his hands. The ink stains on his fingers were his own now, mixed with Tanaka's, with the stains of generations. He looked at the galleries, 12 species, 9,000 years of Dominion doctrine, 40,000 years of Vali silence, and he spoke. "I have nothing to teach you," he said. "I have only a question. What if we have been measuring the wrong things? What if the things we cannot see are the things that matter most? What if patience is a technology? What if quiet is a weapon? What if the only empire that lasts is the one that learns to ask?" The galleries were silent. The translators did not click. The young commander did not speak. And in the lowest tier, Elder Velsharath stood small, ancient, 40,000 years of folded paper unfolding, and she raised her hand. Not to speak, to show. In her palm a single page, handwritten, ink on paper, the same handwriting as the notebook, the same stains, the same question. "I took this," she said, "from the forge 112 years ago, before you were born, Lieutenant, before the Dominion was born, before the galaxy learned to measure anything at all. I have carried it for 40,000 years. I have waited for someone to ask the right question. Today someone asked." She placed the page on the stone floor. The ink began to glow, not bright, soft, the glow of a question that had waited longer than empires, longer than conquests, longer than the certainty of instruments that could not see. Kurasal looked at the page. He looked at the notebook in his hands. He looked at Vexarin with his unpolished armor and his empty eyes, and he understood that the empire was not broken. It was transformed. The measurement had not destroyed it. It had opened a door in a wall that had never been solid, and the empire had walked through, and on the other side was a corridor that registered as empty space and was full of everything. He sat down, the notebook closed, the leather side. And somewhere in the mountain that had been silent for 2 million years, the sphere pulsed on. 4.7 hertz, a heartbeat, a question, a technology that could not be measured, teaching a galaxy that had forgotten how to learn. Kurasal stood alone on the landing platform. The sun was setting over the mountain range, and the white stone drank the last light, and the pine air tasted of mineral and something else, something that might have been the future, or might have been the past, or might have been the same thing seen with different eyes. The eternal flame had left, not retreated, departed, carrying Vexarin and the young commander and 12 species of students back to a dominion that would never be the same. The bridge court on Earth would be the last court the Vrethkai held on alien soil. The next court would be held in the quiet, in the question, in the space between what instruments could see and what hearts could feel. Kurasal opened the notebook, page 1847. The ink was dry now. The stains were his. He read the words aloud, not to the mountain, not to the sphere, not to any gallery that could hear. We do not build bigger than you. We do not build faster. We build differently. The wind took the words. The mountain absorbed them. The sphere pulsed on, and Kurasal's heart beat in time with it, not because it had to, but because it had learned to, because it had chosen to, because differently was the only thing that lasted. He turned to the last page, page 2100. Tanaka's handwriting, still wet when he had found it, now dry. He touched the ink. It did not smudge. It had become part of the paper, part of the leather, part of the satchel that swung at his hip as he walked to the edge of the platform. The ceramic cups were still there, 400 years old. Warm in the last light, Kurasal picked one up. The scar in the glaze where a firing had gone wrong, the chip in the rim where 100 hands had held it, the weight of it in his palm. These were the only measurements that mattered now. He set the cup down. He opened the notebook to the first page. He placed it on the stone, facing the mountain, where the wind could read it and the stone could absorb it and the sphere could pulse its question into the silence. Then he walked away, not toward the ship, not toward the dominion, toward the corridor, toward the door that opened like a flower, toward the question that had no answer and the answer that was only a question asked again, differently, by someone who had finally learned to listen. The notebook stayed on the stone. The cup stayed beside it. The sun set, and the mountain drank the dark, and the sphere pulsed on at 4.7 hertz, a heartbeat in the silence, a technology that could not be measured, a question that would outlast every empire that had forgotten to ask. And in the morning, when the light returned, a new stain would be on the page, ink or rain or something else. The notebook would have 2,101 pages. The question would be larger. The witness would be gone, and the student would remain, and the quiet would go on building what no instrument could see.